If I had the opportunity to sit down with each one of you and ask you a couple of questions, one of my favorite questions that I love to ask anybody is this question, what's your story? I love that question. Another question that I would probably ask you very similar is this idea of how did you get here from there? I love story. Your story is huge. My story is important. Story is really, really important. And a couple of aspects that I would even enjoy more as I listen to you and your story is I would love it if you told me your story chronologically. I would love to hear about the first decade of your life, the second decade. I would be interested in the highs and lows of your story, of your whole life. But I would especially be interested in the early decades, because this is so much of where our thoughts and our ideas and our beliefs come from in that first and second decade. Another part of your story that I would be really interested in is I would want to know, tell me about your dad. Tell me about your father. Tell me about your relationship with your father. I don't know why this is, but I've seen it in men and women over the many years that I've been working in the marriage and family business, that something to do with our fathers is affecting our view of God. There are all kinds of fathers that you and I and different ones that we grew up with. Let me give you a couple of examples of our earthly fathers and how they shape our thoughts and our beliefs, and they actually direct our behavior for many years of our life. One example is that of an authoritarian father. When I say that word, immediately you relate to that, like, yes, that's my dad. Military rules, it was just all about the rules, and it was all about performance. And something in you and me growing up with a dad like that is we just want to rebel from that. Maybe that wasn't your dad. Maybe you had an absent father, one that actually left. You had a sense of rejection that came when your father took off. Or you had a father, maybe similar to mine, that though he was present, he was absent. He was so consumed in his business life that there was no emotional connection with him. He might as well have been absent, even though he was present. That could have been your kind of father. Maybe yours was abusive. And just the way that he treated you and mistreated your family. And it creates all kinds of insecurities and lack of trust and this emotional connection that is really to take place with our Heavenly Father. Maybe your dad was like mine. Mine was a critical and judgmental father. All of us kind of have a strange story. It's rare these days that there are really good father stories. I don't hear a lot of good ones these days, and they're all different. And my dad, he wasn't present in the first decade of my life, and then I connected with him in the second decade of my life. But by the time I was 22 till 50, he became like my chief critic, and he was judgmental. And when you grow up with this kind of earthly father, it puts a fingerprint, it puts a thumbprint, it puts an imprint on your mind and your heart and your soul. And sometimes it takes a lifetime to get over these kinds of beliefs. Now, I'm going to share with you in just a couple of minutes some of the false beliefs that were developed in my mind that had to be changed over time as a result of growing up with that father. Now, with that kind of influence in our early decades and with our fathers, it creates all kinds of thoughts and false beliefs. And I want to show you just a couple of things. One thing is we cannot make ourselves stop thinking a thought. It is in vain for me to say, stop it. Don't think that. Don't feel that. Don't do that. That's in vain. We can't make ourselves stop thinking a thought. Here's another one. We cannot think two thoughts at once. Now, the first time I heard that, I thought, are you sure? Hold on, I'm going to try to think two thoughts. Maybe you're like me in that you're trying to think two thoughts right now. You can't do it. You can't think two simultaneous thoughts. And the other is, it is possible to replace one thought with another thought. It is possible to take this false belief and this idea, this thought that we got in early decades, or we got along a part of our story, and it is possible to replace that one thought with the truth. Now, this idea of the truth and replacing false beliefs with the truth, we can put it this way in another phrase. We cannot erase false beliefs. we must replace them with the truth. We cannot erase them. We must replace them with the truth. A lot of you probably know of the Bible in the New Testament. There's these letters by Paul. He's written one to the people in Rome, and tucked away in this book, in the 12th chapter of the book of Romans, is one of those powerful thoughts about truth in replacing false beliefs with truth. He says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." Now, this first part, do not conform to the pattern of this world. There's a pattern in the world, whether you've noticed the patterns or the trends, but the world in which I live in, the world in which you live in, there's a pattern, and it's constantly drawing me into it. It's giving us ideas. It's giving us thoughts that if you go to this person, if you go to that thing, if you do this thing, if you do that thing, that's where you're going to find life, and that's where you're going to be significant, and that's where you're going to be secure. The world, the pattern of this world is calling us to this idea. But he says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. It is possible not to conform to the pattern of this world that's drawing us into a world of lies and false beliefs. But our minds and our lives, our behavior, our emotions can actually be changed. They can be transformed by the renewing of our mind. So when we speak about truth, what is so important is when we look at our false beliefs, the things that we have thought about, the beliefs that we've had put into our mind, either early formative years or later in our life, it is possible to replace that false belief with the truth and to be conformed to the image of Christ and be conformed by the renewing of our minds. Now, let me give you just a couple of examples from my life. I've been working through this for a number of years, and I mentioned that one of the reasons that I'm so interested in your story, especially about your relationship with your dad, is because the things that happened and didn't happen in that relationship affect these false beliefs. For example, the first false belief that I had was, I am not known. Inside of you, inside of me, inside of the human soul, is this desire to be known and to know, to be loved and loved. And when your father is absent, when he's critical, when he's judgmental, it's like, you don't know me. You don't really know me, and the soul longs for that. But here's the truth that I replaced that false belief. I am known by God. I'll never forget the time that I was reading the Bible, and I came across this idea that I may not be known by my Father in this way, and I may not be known by other people, but I am known by God, and I don't erase that belief. I replace it with the truth that I may not be known here, but I'm known by God. It's such a beautiful thing when we replace it with the truth. Here's another one that I struggle with is I do not belong. Something in my wiring and in my personality, there's been just this longing to belong. And again, I think it's deep in the human soul. It's in the soul of everyone here. You want to belong. You want to belong to something. You want to belong to someone. And the false belief that I had, that I carried around, is like, I don't belong. And yet, once again, when I was growing in my relationship with Jesus Christ and when I was spending time in the Bible and in the Scriptures, I came across the truth that I belong to God. Man, when that entered my thinking, when it's like you think and you feel that you don't belong, but you belong to me and you're mine. When I replaced that false belief with that truth, it was life-changing. It changed the way that I acted and behaved, and it even changed my feelings, where feeling isolated and not accepted and not belonging. Now I had the sense of belonging and connectedness and acceptance first and foremost by God and His Son, Jesus Christ. And one other one that drove me in my life for many years is I must achieve to be significant. Now, once again, I think it's in the soul of all men and women. There's something in you that wants to make a difference. You want to be significant. There's something in you and me that wants to be secure, and we want to be deeply satisfied in our lives. And yet for many years, because my father was critical and judgmental, I felt like I had to achieve to be significant. I had to do something to be significant. And then I came across the truth in Scripture that I was valuable before I was born. That's a wild idea. That might take you a couple of minutes to think about, but you want to know something? You and I were thought of before we were even formed. And you and I were of value before you and I were even born. When God saw you and He made you and He fashioned you, Psalm 139 says that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. We were of value even before we did anything. That's the idea of replacing false beliefs with the truth. What are your false beliefs? When you think about your story, and particularly the first and second decade of your story, what happened to you? What was done to you that you did not deserve? How were you treated, especially from a father or from a mother? And what were the beliefs and the lies that have been driving you, that have been producing these kinds of emotions and actions that are making you weary and tired? What are the false beliefs for you? You replace them with the truth. You don't erase them. You don't say, stop thinking about them, but you replace them with the truth. And this is why I love this verse from Jesus. In John chapter 8, He said, then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. What is it that you're after, that I'm after, every day in my life? Don't you want to be a free man? Don't you want to be a free woman? Don't you want to walk with a sense of love and joy and peace and hope and freedom? It comes from walking in the truth. It comes from growing in a relationship with Jesus and being in His Word and letting the Word transform your mind, renewing your mind, finding the truth of God and taking captive every thought. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine a world of men and women that were able to look at their story, identify the external event that occurred, that created the internal message or the false belief that has been driving them? That they would be able to see that their anger and their wrath and their rage and their bitterness and their anxiety and all these negative emotions are actually attached to these lies. But can you imagine a man or a woman that understands the truth and replaces that false belief with the truth? And they begin to walk with freedom and with hope and joy and peace, that there's a God in heaven who loves them through Jesus Christ. And you and I are valuable to Him, and we can do significant things with Him. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free.